Well, I need to sit and read a minute. Do you guys need to sit and listen to a story? I haven't read this one, but this is called The Quilt Walk by Sandra Dallas, and I'd like to read it to us. It's kind of highly acclaimed and got lots of good reviews, so we're going to start reading this one. We'll start with chapter 1. We are going west. We are going to Colorado, Pa told us. He just came home from his first trip to Colorado Territory and announced that he and Ma and I were moving west to strike it rich. Pa was gone almost a year. Gold had been discovered in the Rocky Mountains back in 1858, and 4 years after that, my pa, Tom Hatchet, had gone off to find himself a mine. He promised he'd come home with a wheelbarrow full of nuggets. He didn't come back with any nuggets. He didn't even bring back a wheelbarrow. Instead, he brought us the news that we were moving half across the country. We're moving where? Ma asked. To Golden, Pa answered. It's a town at the edge of the Colorado Mountains, a booming place where we'll make a pot of money, Maggie. Ma's real name was Margaret, but everybody called her Maggie. Are there gold mines in Golden? No, Maggie. The mines are in the mountains, Pa replied. In Golden, the miners need places to buy their picks and shovels and gold pans and to get their food supplies before they head off to the mountains. That means Golden will need stores, hotels, restaurants, offices, and banks. These businesses need some place to set up. Golden is as bustling as a place as you ever saw. I propose to build a business block. I'll make a fortune from mining the miners. I'm going to load a wagon with construction supplies and we'll go to Golden. By ourselves? Ma sat down in her kitchen rocker and I perched on the footstool. Not by ourselves. Will's coming too. Will was Pa's brother. And Catherine? Did she agree to go? Catherine is a dutiful wife, Pa said. She will do as her husband says. I would never describe Catherine as dutiful. She is too independent, Ma said. She took a deep breath and leaned back in the rocker. Then she asked softly, What you are saying is you expect me to be a dutiful wife. You made this decision without consulting me. What if I don't want to go, Thomas? Pa frowned at her. You are my wife, he said. You may stay if you wish, but I will not be here. Pa's voice sounded harsh. Would he really leave us behind, I wondered? He had been away a year, and I'd been afraid that something had happened to him, that he'd gotten sick or had fallen off a mountain. Ma'd never say anything, but I knew she's worried too. What would we do if he abandoned us now? I have already made inquiries about selling the farm, Pa said. Don't you see, Maggie? I can get enough for the place to buy the building materials and the wagons to transport them. I'll go, Pa. Me and Skittles, I said, hugging my cat. I talked in a small voice because Pa didn't usually like me to speak up. Children should be seen and not heard, he told me often enough, although I was 10 now and thought I had a right to voice my own opinions. I had learned a great deal about Colorado in school and knew it was a wild place with gunslingers and Indians, outlaws and prospectors. Some of them had found gold just by throwing a hat on the ground and digging where it landed. It sounded much more exciting than Quincy, Illinois, the town closest to our farm. Here I was expected to act like a young lady, to sit and quilt with Ma and Aunt Catherine, and to practice my embroidery. Ma had sent me to school for girls for a time, a place where I was supposed to learn to have fine manners and cross-stitch a sampler. There hadn't been enough money for me to continue. I didn't mind. I wasn't very good at sewing and I had to take out so many of the cross stitches that I thought my eyes would cross. But those weren't the only reasons I spoke up. Ma would never let me go with Pa by myself. She'd have to come with us. We wouldn't be separated again. Instead of reprimanding me, Pa smiled. He leaned over and took my mother's hands. You see, Maggie, Emmy Blue knows we can get a start in Golden. His voice softened. A new start is what we need, Maggie. What will happen if we lose the farm? But the people I love are here, Ma said. How can I leave my family, our neighbors? Will I ever sit and quilt with friends again? Moving west is a fine thing for a man. It means freedom and a chance for a better life for you. But it doesn't mean a thing to me. I'll be leaving behind everything I care about. Home, church, school for Emmy Blue. Who knows if there are schools in Colorado or churches? If there aren't, you can start them. Come with me, Maggie. You will do well. You have a stout heart. It will be better life, I promise. Do I have a choice? There was a stubbornness in you as big as a mule. She looked sad, and I knew she was thinking not only about her family, but about the graves in the cemetery, the ones we visited every Sunday. They were marked with a piece of white marble shaped like a tree stump. Ma didn't talk much about her babies who had died. She said it wasn't proper, but I knew she grieved for them, and I did too. I had loved them, especially my younger sister, whose tombstone read Agnes Ruth, our sweet baby girl, 2 years, 3 months, and 7 days. Pa would take Ma's hand as we stood beside the hatchet graves. Then he'd sigh and put his other hand on my shoulder and say, I'm glad we have you, Emmy Blue. Once the decision was made to go to Colorado, Ma made up her mind to like it. She'd said about dandelions that if we couldn't do anything about them, we'd just have to enjoy them. That was the way she treated almost everything. If a thing couldn't be helped, she accepted it. Not that her parents did, though. Grandpa Bluestone told Pa he ought to be horsewhipped for taking Ma out where she could be killed by wild Indians. And Grandma Mouse cried and said she'd never see Ma or me again. Grandma Mouse wasn't her real name. She was called that because she was so small and because she had a pinched face and beady eyes like a mouse. She was really Emma Bluestone, and I was named for her. Only at the last minute, Ma told me Pa rebelled at calling me exactly after Grandma Mouse. So he had written my name in the Bible as Emily Bluestone Hatchet. Perhaps it was a good thing I didn't have Grandma's full name, since I was not at all like her. She was tiny, while at 10 years of age I was already a good hand taller, with brown eyes unlike her blue ones. She was fine-boned, while I was gangly and awkward, unladylike. Grandma Mouse said, Ma called me high-spirited. There is time enough for her to become a lady, she told Grandma Mouse. It wasn't hurt for her to begin now. She could start by threading our needles for us. Nothing befits a lady more than fine stitching, Grandma Mouse said. One day then, when Ma's friends and neighbors who made up her quilting circle met at our house, Ma put my best friend Abigail Stark and me to work. We were told to sit under the quilt frame while the guests stitched so that we could thread their needles. We sat there for an hour, the quilt above us, our hands sweaty as we tried to poke the thread through the eyes of the needles. As she licked the end of a thread, Abigail pointed to a woman's shoe, and I saw that it was untied. The shoe belonged to Mrs. Browning, a woman we disliked because she said we were disheveled urchins and told on us when we stole apples off her tree. I picked up her laces so gently that the woman did not feel it. At first meaning to tie them for her, but instead I tied the laces of her other shoe. When the woman stood up to roll the quilt, Mrs. Browning tripped and fell against a table, and her elbow landed in a plate of gingerbread Ma had set out. Then she knocked a display of pine cones resting on the sideboard to the floor, smashing them. Grandma Mouse, who had glued the pine cones together, called us disgraceful and insisted we be punished. Mrs. Browning was unhurt, but she shrieked that the gingerbread had stained the elbow of her white blouse. So Ma, a look of fury on her face, took us both by our arms and dragged us down the hall and into the kitchen, shutting the door. Ma, I began. Ma put her hand excuse me. Ma put up her hand and shook her head. She clamped her hand over her mouth because she had begun to laugh. Then she wiped her eyes because she was laughing so hard she had begun to cry. "You bad, bad girl," she said, and then began to laugh again. "I have tried to find a way to get rid of those ugly pine cones ever since your grandma gave them to us. Did you see the look on that pious Mrs. Browning's face? Did you notice how many of the other women smiled? Miss Browning is not a favorite among us, and she will never live this down." Abigail looked at me as if there was something wrong with my mother. Ma caught the look and said, "You need not fear, Abigail. I have my wits about me." Then she took a broom handle and knocked it against the cushion on a chair. I understood her meaning and cried out, "No, Ma, I'm sorry. Don't whip me." She pretended to make a few more whacks, then said, "This is our secret, girls. Now go to the barn to play where the ladies can't see you." Before she left, she cut a piece of gingerbread for each of us. That was the last time that Grandma Mouse suggested I learn to sew. "Emmy Blue is helping in other ways," Ma said whenever Grandma Mouse brought up the subject of my making a quilt to take to Golden. "Well, I hope Colorado Territory is not so uncivilized that she will fail to become a proper young lady," was Grandma Mouse's reply. That was exactly what I had hoped, and that was exactly why I was excited about going to Golden. After all, Golden was the Wild West. I was so busy watching out for Indians and hunting for gold that I'd never have to pick up a needle again. That's the end of chapter 2, and chapter 1, we'll read chapter 2 getting ready next.